And welcome into the Card Central postgame show here on STL Sports Central. Cardinals 8-7 winners in the second game of their series against the Cubs. I am Chris Pelikan. He is Brenden Schaeffer. Brenden, I feel like this is time for a nice big collective sigh of relief with the way that game. I don't really know if that game lacked for anything in terms of drama, in terms of great plays. For people who do what you and I do and need things to talk about, I think we could probably put together 2 or 3 good hours on this one. Your thoughts on your initial thoughts. We got plenty to get to on a great win for the Cardinals tonight.
This was unbelievable. Top to bottom, you're right. This game had a little bit of everything. And the ebbs and flows, the great plays, the plays that weren't so great, but the Cardinals take advantage. Pete Crow-Armstrong, I know, is a really good player. He had a weird night for the Chicago Cubs, as I'm sure we will get into. But the Cardinals continuing the power surge with those lefty bats, mashing the home runs. We saw it last night. We see it again in this one. The game ends up getting a little bit more uncomfortable in the late innings than you want. Steven Matz's struggles continue, but the late inning bullpen guys were able to hold serve by a nose. This was a heck of a game, and I'm sure everybody's got thoughts. So get the comments in. I will be throwing your comments on the screen as we go along here. Just subscribe to the channel, and you'll be able to get your live comments in right away, and we'll try to get to as many as we can on a crazy night as the Cardinals, Chris, are now 2.5 games back of the Cubs. We had to wait quite a while to get this Cards-Cub rivalry in 2025, but it's hitting now that it's here.
Absolutely. And you beat me to the punch on it. This is the Card Central postgame show sponsored by Hot Shots. Brenden Schaeffer, Chris Pelikan with you. As he mentioned, jump into the comments section there in YouTube. Hit that like and subscribe button while you're down there. Do us the solid. We greatly appreciate it. Would love to get your thoughts on a game that has lots of thoughts to be had, I guess is the best way to put it. And Brenden, I don't even really know where to start on this thing. There's a million different places we can start, a million different things we can talk about. I guess I think the first thing that I throw out, and we've talked about this a ton over the course of the year, but the difference in my mind between this team and years past, there's obviously structural differences to the way the teams have been built, but this is a team that seems to find ways to win games. And when Michael McGreevy gave up 5 runs in, I believe, the 3rd inning, you're sitting there saying, okay, tough night. We got 2 more left in the series. Let's see how this goes. And this team, I say it all the time. Tony La Russa talked about the hard 9. This team, Ollie Marmol's got the hard 9 going. This team never gives up in a situation where it's 1,000,000 degrees outside. You've got a rookie starter out there who might not give you a ton of length. He battled back really nicely. Again, I just think it speaks to the will of this team that they are able to come back against one of the premier teams in baseball right now, and fall behind by 3 runs and still find enough mustard to rally back and then hold off a pretty furious charge from the Cubs.
Yeah, it's not going to happen every game, Chris, that you get behind and you come back and win. But the Cardinals have the character and the makeup of a team that's capable of doing it with, I think, an abnormal amount of frequency. We have seen it in spots where it just comes from nothing. I think back to a few days ago when it was 5-2 in the 8th inning, and you've got nobody on base, and they find a way to come back against the Reds and win that game. Those you kind of say, wow, that came out of nowhere. Tonight's didn't really come out of nowhere, though. You saw the offense in the beginning, and you saw it last night in the series, so you feel like this is something that they're capable of doing, and it just kind of had that vibe that they were going to be in this ball game. Just continuing to see the home run power. That's not a usual way that they've been able to do it, but you'll certainly take it as the things are just exploding over the course of this series. And like you might usually say, well, Busch Stadium, not a big home run park, but the Cubs are playing in the same yard, and the Cardinals are out homering this Cubs team over the first 2 games of this series. It's just been very impressive the way that they've been able to do it. And then hold on. I can't say enough about Phil Maton. What a pickup he was. I know he's the only signing the Cardinals made in the offseason, but he was a darn good one.
Michael Hellman.
Yeah, well, I think technically he was a traded for nothing. Like cash considerations. But yeah, he was the only significant, notable guy that they went out and spent a little bit of money to get, and it happened very late in the process. But he has been, I think, one of the unsung heroes of this Cardinals team. And tonight, getting them out of a jam, shout out Alec Burleson, though, for that. That was an unbelievable catch by Burley into the netting. I thought at first that it probably scraped the netting and the Cubs were going to be able to But I love the reaction from Chip Carey when he saw Craig Counsell say, no, it's not a challenge play, and just goes berserk. I mean, the vibes right now are really, really fun for this Cardinals-Cubs rivalry. But Maton, and then I understand Helsley, gives up a couple of hits. The fastball is still a concern. I've seen from the commenters saying that's, something that's still getting hit pretty hard. And I agree with that. But for him to be able to get it done on that play by Arenado, I mean, it had everything. What a game for the Cardinals.
Defense was fantastic. And, I think you started off early in your remarks right there talking about the power. And I think we knew the ball was flying tonight. Nootbaar's home run early in the game. I mean, when he hit that, I thought, okay, that's like a shallow fly out to right field. And clearly he got it, but that thing just kept carrying, and it ended up being just a massive home run. So clearly, again, we've seen this spike in power with the team. I'm not sure how much of this is because of the weather at this point in time, that the ball's carrying with how hot it's been, that sort of thing. That's my question to you, Brenden. Do you think that the power that we've seen with this team is this? I don't want to sit there and say this is a total anomaly, because I think this team puts good at bats together. And I think power comes when you put good at bats together. But do you think that the amount of power we're seeing recently is a fluke, an anomaly, or do you think that we will see this team continue to sort of build off of what they've done recently with the power?
I think it could be a little bit of somewhere in between, where like this was a Cardinals team that we were talking about as being starved for power for a while. And I think they're capable of being more than that, like a bottom of the barrel type of team when it comes to homers. But you also have not very many guys that you would project to be 25 or 30 home run hitters. You might have quite a few 15 to 20 to 24 home run hitters. And that might be the way that the Cardinals can up their power game just a little bit. But it's weird. It's just not been something they've done. I will say this, the two matchups in this series against Ben Brown last night and tonight against Tyone, favorable matchup for left-handed hitters and guys that have given up homers this season. So for the Cardinals to jump on those matchups, I think is important. And maybe that's the answer, Chris. It's going to be situational for the Cardinals to, I think, as Brant Brown has preached the entire year, there are times to slug and there are times to hit. And right now, it's a time for the Cardinals to slug, and they're taking advantage of it. I know a lot's been made, too, across baseball about the actual baseball this year and whether it's more conducive, less conducive, torpedo bats. Like, we've got all these outside elements that we can wonder, is that affecting power in one way or the other? But like I said, both teams were playing under the same circumstances these last two games, and the Cardinals were able to be the team that came out on top with more home runs and having that be a significant factor for their offense. I don't think it'll be like this every game, but clearly you've got some guys, like if Nolan Gorman, Chris, is going to continue to be in this lineup, you think back a couple of years in 2023, there were times where he would carry the team on his back offensively. He had 27 home runs that season. People kind of forget how good he was that year, but it came in stretches. You'd love to see some consistency, but right now you'll take it where you're getting it from a guy like Nolan Gorman. I don't think Nootbaar is going to be a huge power threat, but I think he's a consistent hitter who fell on the worst slump of his career and clearly is out of it now. Yeah, I think it's going to be a part of their game, but more than anything, continuing to hit the ball hard. That's the name of the game for the Cardinals, whether it's a single, a double, or a homer. As a result, the contact that they have seen in this series has been high quality.
Do you think if you polled your average Cardinal fan, and we have better than average Cardinal fans in our chat here, that people would know that Lars Nootbaar is leading this team in home runs right now with 11?
I don't know if they would know it. I don't know.
I'll be honest, when Chip Carey said team leading 11th home run, I'm like, wow, that is, I mean, it's like I knew it, but I'm also like, that is surprising. And again, I mean, kudos to him. It begs the question again, and I don't want to go too far down this wormhole right now, but is Lars Nootbaar better suited for this fifth slot that he's in right now? Or, do we still like the on-base percentage play at the top of the lineup? Donovan's been doing nice things. Clearly moving Mason Winn from 9 to 2 suited him well. At this point in time, moving, Nootbaar from leadoff to fifth has suited him well. I mean, it feels like the lineup is kind of a influx, fluid situation at all times. I mean, what are your thoughts on Nootbaar and him being the biggest source of power this team has?
Yeah, I mean, Lars Nootbaar has been, over 5 years of his big league career, an above average player. Just across the board, OPS plus of around 112. That means he's like 12% above a league average hitter at the plate. And he does it with on base. He does it with doubles. He does it with the occasional home run. The home runs are more than, we're used to seeing from him. That still probably puts him on a pace to be at around 22, 23 home runs, which is a totally reasonable number. And I think the Cardinals would be glad to see that. Now, if he is going to be your team leader in homers, you may consider moving him into more of an RBI producing spot in the lineup. I am not one that thinks that the batting order is the end all be all. I think he happened to be in a slump, and I think they moved him down because he was hitting so poorly. But sometimes that can just be what a player needs, is just a change of scenery within the batting order, something to shake things loose, because he is not a strikeout guy. And Chris, my bold prediction to begin the year was he would walk more times than strike out this year. And for a while he was doing it.
Yeah.
Obviously right now that's no longer something that's in play after he went like
for 27
with like 25 Ks. It just was not my cup of tea that couple of weeks for my prediction. But I think you move him, and because it's different than what it was, it gave him a different look. More than anything, I think that's what's valuable. But I do like Brendan Donovan leadoff. I thought at the beginning of the year, I wasn't totally sold on Donovan batting third. I felt like having him at the top would make more sense. That proved me wrong for a while, because he's having the type of campaign that is deserving of an all-star bid. I don't know if he's going to get it. Get out there and vote, Cardinals fans, if you feel the same way that I do. But I'm perfectly confident having him in the leadoff spot. What makes it sing, though, Chris, that they didn't have in the early months is Alec Burleson hitting the way that he has, because you can put that left-handed bat at number 3, and now suddenly everything flows really, really nicely. Got a lefty leadoff, and this is predominantly against righties on the mound. We'll see tomorrow with a lefty for the Cubs what it looks like. But you go lefty-righty on the way down. That's something that fits really well. The Cardinals eventually accepted that, hey, Arenado is not the cleanup hitter that he had been for his entire career. It's okay to accept a little less from him at the plate and move him down. The lineup feels like, and we saw the same lineup tonight that we did last night. Yep. To me, it fits together really, really nicely with the guys that are performing. I know Walker wasn't in it. I know we want to see more of Jordan Walker, but he hasn't been playing as well. And this iteration of the Cardinals is working. So I think they're going to roll with it, especially against right-handed pitching.
It ain't broke, don't fix it. He is Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Chris Pelikan. This is the Card Central postgame show. It is brought to you by Hot Shots, St. Louis's home for all the games all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshotsnet.com, and by DraftKings. The crown is yours, folks. Keep jumping into that YouTube chat. Love hearing your thoughts on this one. There's so much to get to.
There is.
I saw a few comments where people wanted us to talk about Michael McGreevy. And so this is an interesting one too, Brendan. I mean, he goes out there and obviously he's had a lot of success in his limited action this year. Tough night, right? Obviously it's tough to pitch on a night where it's feels like 115 out there. He seemed to get the ball up a little bit. I looked at what Michael McGreevy did tonight, and for me, there's some really good and there's some that wasn't so good. And when he has the third inning that he had, and it started with 2 Texas League little bloop singles, I believe, off the bats of was that Horner and it was Horner and I'm blanking on who was between him and
McGuire. Okay. I got a cop to it. As it was happening, I had to go back and watch the McGreevy inning because I was putting my son to bed, and he runs out into the living room, and I say, what the hell happened? How is it 5-2? Right as Mason Winn homers. So I had to debate whether to put the kid to bed or not, because he seemed to be the luck charm.
You got through all the tough stuff. So he gives up 2 little bloop singles, right? And I think at that point in time, you saw a little frustration. Like, I made my pitch, and I got 2 guys on with nobody out, right? And then all of a sudden, then he walks Hap, and then Kyle Tucker comes up and delivers a 2-run double or single it was, and then you get the Suzuki 3-4. And it was funny because you look at that and I go, this is so young pitcher, right? Like, a couple things don't go your way and then it all falls apart, right? So from that standpoint, hey, learning experience, you got to buckle down especially when a couple of little balls fall into play like that. You got guys on who probably don't deserve to be on, but I give him a ton of credit for coming back after that terrible inning, pitching a really nice 4th. I thought he probably could have gotten through the 5th. I certainly understand why Ollie pulled him at that point in time, going lefty when PCA came up with a couple guys on. And so, an up and down night, a good learning experience, I think, for McGreevy. What were your thoughts on how the Cardinals rookie righty fared tonight?
Yeah, I think they've given him some really tough challenges. When you think about the May 4th appearance against the Mets, where he went 5 2 thirds innings of relief to win that game for the Cardinals. I mean, that was a close game, second leg of a doubleheader, where they just needed him to go the distance because they didn't have the rested bullpen. And then you think about the Dodgers outing that they gave him, where he got through 6 innings in that game against the tough Dodger lineup. I know he gave up 4 runs, but you notice those types of things when it's a young pitcher. Then it's like, all right, the White Sox game, maybe that was a little bit unexpected that they were going to have him travel and have him have to be there for that. So they hold him to 76 pitches, did well over 5 innings. Tonight was another good challenge where it's a tough lineup, and you see how a guy responds. I would have to imagine, obviously we're here doing this show, but I would imagine that's what Oliver Marmol is saying about Michael McGreevy tonight, is you see how a guy responds to those situations, which are going to happen if you're a young pitcher, an old pitcher. It doesn't make a difference. You're going to have moments like that where guys start to hit your stuff. You're going to have moments where bloops fall in and then they hit your stuff, so it feels like an avalanche crashing down. For him to settle it in and give the Cardinals 5 more outs, I think was important, and you were able to get out of the 5th inning clean. I felt like it was a fine outing, and I think there's going to be more good things to come from Michael McGreevy at whatever point they get him into the rotation regularly. That time has not come yet, but I think he served them well for this month of June when we saw him 3 times.
What are your thoughts on McGreevy in a 6-man rotation? Do you believe that, there's this great question, and I think that you'd be hard pressed to find people who don't believe he's earned the right to be in a major league rotation at this point in time. That every time he's had his name called, he goes out there, he performs well. He's a polished guy. He's by no means young. He's done a lot of stuff in the minor leagues. He's ready for it, but clearly there are 5 guys right now who the team feels are give them a better chance to win, or at least have a contract that belies, innings and starts and so on and so forth. Do you like the idea of him being a guy who they can monitor his innings in Memphis, pop up when needed to maybe make that off day start to keep people in line with rest? Or do you think at this point in time, Michael McGreevy should be getting the ball every 6th day, probably as it were, as since they're not pulling anyone outside of the rotation right now?
Yeah, it's tough to do the 6-man rotation thing for a long stretch. Like, I think the reason you're able to get away with it at times in this month is because of the way they are churning through the relievers essentially in Memphis. And so Roddery Munoz throws an inning last night. He's going to be the guy to go out for McGreevy today. And then in all likelihood, it'll be somebody else that comes up tomorrow. It's tough because of the nature of the bullpen, especially during a stretch like this. I feel like it's kind of a catch-22, because if we're talking about in August and September when all those Thursday off days return for the Cardinals, well, then you would see they don't really need to have a 6-man rotation, because that's another day before you see Sonny, another day before you see Liberatore, and it gets to be like a week-long stretch. But when you don't have off days, you're like, okay, we want to do it, but we have to do it carefully, because you don't want to get caught without the necessary innings available out of your bullpen. Guys like Kyle Leahy have gone on a pace where he's on a pace to throw like 90, 100 innings this year, and that's just not really sustainable. Right. Phil Maton joined this team late in the spring, and they tried to really be careful in the way they ramped him up, but he's been so reliable. They've turned to him, and I think more recently have tried to space out his outings for that very reason, because you're thinking long game, end game right now if you're Ollie Marmol. So that's part of it that makes it a challenge. I'm okay. I maybe one of the few who have been okay with the way the Cardinals have handled McGreevy this year, because frankly, you don't expect to be sitting on June 24th and not have had a single pitcher, not just a starter, but any pitcher go on the injured list all year long. Ask the Dodgers. I know, knocking on wood. Ask the Dodgers what kind of luxury that would be, though. Like, it's just not something that normally happens in modern baseball. That's a credit to the way the Cardinals have handled their pitching staff from top to bottom, have spaced guys out, have been planning days and weeks in advance for how they wanted to maneuver certain tough stretches of schedule. I think they're doing a nice job with it. I've said since the beginning of the year, we're going to see McGreevy 12 or more times. He's going to pitch a dozen or more times in St. Louis. I still think there's a decent chance that happens, depending on how the trade deadline goes, depending on how the continued health of the staff goes. He's almost to half that number by now, and he's done a very nice job, in my opinion. So I'm okay with the status quo. I think like full-time 6-man rotation is probably too much to ask of your bullpen if you were to go that route.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't agree more. And the thought that they're going to get through 3 more months without a single injury in the rotation seems to be, I think you're, if it happens, fantastic. You're really excited, but that's not a reasonable thing to expect, especially with the age of some of the guys who are running out there right now for the Cardinals.
I would agree with that, but I also want to bring up this point in this same conversation. For those who have been clamoring for McGreevy, and I get it, he's deserving of an MLB roster spot. Like, everything he's done in Memphis, he doesn't have more to prove down there. He's just kind of there and waiting. So I understand the clamoring and the desire to see him on this Cardinals club every 5th, every 6th day. I'm not faulting fans for that. but I just want to make note where, like, all right, he gives up 4 runs against the Dodgers, gives up 5 against the Cubs here, and doesn't get through 5 innings. You have a rotation of guys that there have been outings like that for Fetty. There have been outings like that for Palante and for Michaelis, but it maybe speaks to just how darn good those guys have been, that the guy that everybody goes, get Michaelis out of here, get Palante out of here. He's going to come up and be human as well. I think it just is a good contextualizer for what the Cardinal rotation has done this year that's actually been pretty darn impressive.
Couldn't agree more. Speaking of very impressive, we've been talking for 20 plus minutes and haven't even said the name Mason Winn yet.
Yeah.
This is a guy who, it's just hard to say too many good things about Mason Winn. Obviously the glove has played for several years now. The bat continues to improve. And tonight he really was the offensive standout of the team. Take away all the great offensive things he did. Clearly he ends up scoring the base running, scores the game-winning run on a great base running heads-up play.
Brilliant.
I feel strange that we've gone 20 minutes and haven't said Mason Winn, because I don't know that, anyone was more impactful in this game than he was.
That is a credit to just how many darn things happened in this baseball game. But the play that I think, other than Arenado's play to finish it, which it's like, you barely had time for that to register how good of a play that was. In his play that almost was the best play I've ever seen on the ball he knocked down 109 miles per hour off the bat. If he gets an out on that, it will never be topped. But of course, he came up a little bit short. But on Mason Winn, his base running and his acumen to be making the right play. When Pop Warner, who I think deserves a lot of credit as well, is on it the whole time. He watched PCA do a little twirl after catching the second out of an inning.
Cool, isn't he, man? He just his mom and dad are actors. He's just a cool LA guy, dude. Everything he does looks smooth, and then that.
I love PCA as a player. That's the one thing you can't do, though, right? Like, you can be as cocky and confident and brash and bold and all those things, and you can do it cool. You can be Joe Cool. You can't be that as a detriment to your team on the scoreboard. That's just bad baseball play. Right? It's just unnecessary. You got to know how many outs there are. But Pop Warner knew how many outs there were. Mason Winn was aware of everything that Pop Warner was aware of, because he's watching the whole time. The replay just blows your mind, because Winn, there's never even a gap. He's just going the whole way, because he's locked eyes with the third base coach that is all over what's happening in deep center field. And that is just a really, really good baseball play. You take advantage. If they give you an inch, Chris, in this Cardinals-Cubs rivalry, you have to be ready to take it. Mason Winn is that kind of player. So Chewy asks for my thoughts on extending Mason Winn. Here are my thoughts. Do it. Do it yesterday. I've been screaming all year from the rooftops. I know the Cardinals are not in a position in 2025 to make like future decisions, because this was the runway year to find out about what kind of team they are and how soon they might be able to be in a contending window before they start thinking about spending money. Mason Winn is the guy you extend and you plant the flag on, because like you said, his defense we've known for years is elite. The bat continues to evolve, and whatever you're paying him today, the price goes up from here, because eventually I do believe Mason Winn becomes a consistently above average hitter and base runner and Gold Glove player. So if you want to pay him now for his defense and the potential of what his bat becomes before that happens, that would be my strong recommendation to the St. Louis Cardinals, because they are in a contending window. Like, whether they make the playoffs this year or not, I think we have seen enough of this core of Cardinals players to say, you know what, this isn't going to be a 3-year rebuild. They're not going to have to tear anything down to the studs. They've got a lot in-house that's going to kind of birth the next iteration of Cardinal baseball. Mason Winn has to be front and center of that. So yeah, I would have done the Bobby Witt, maybe not to that extent, because Bobby Witt's shown it offensively. But by Bobby Witt, I mean, I would make Mason Winn today the player in Cardinals history that got the longest contract. I don't know that it would be the highest dollar amount contract, but I would say we're buying you out to the beginning of free agency. And how many of those free agency years can we get for like 20 to 22 to 25 million on the way down the road? I would be all in on Mason Winn personally. And maybe there are some Cardinals fans who feel that way tonight.
He's such an interesting test case, because you talk about the guys who sign long-term extensions early in their careers, and almost all of those guys are bat first people, right? Like the ones who you project as long-term, potent offensive players. And, you look at what's happening in Atlanta right now. And Michael Harris was a guy who came up, different positions, obviously, but looked really good with the bat early on. The glove had played from day one when he was a 20-year-old, and they give him an 8-year contract. Now it's, wasn't a huge dollar value, $80 million, right? So if you're thinking $10 million for an elite center fielder is pretty good bargain. Michael Harris can't hit this year all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing because, again, with Winn, like, I think that Mason Winn's got the intangibles to be the guy you build this franchise around. He obviously plays a very, very fundamentally sound game. We've talked about this before, I think you and I, how I liken him to Molina in a lot of ways. Like Yadier Molina came up as a glove first guy who couldn't hit much and just worked his way into being a really, really nice hitter. And so I think there's some parallels there. It's interesting. And I will say, and I noticed this in the chat, somebody mentioned with Chaim Bloom taking over, Chaim Bloom does not have a long, rich history of passing out long-term deals as an executive, right? Like, I mean, in his mind, especially coming from Tampa where they weren't even allowed to do that.
Right.
I think he's a guy who Tampa has historically kept guys in the minors a year longer so they could hold service time, and then they get their 6 years out of them before they go.
What scares me a little bit about what's to come, because we don't, as long as Cardinal ownership, Chris, invests to a level above the Rays, which is not 100%. A high bar clear, but I that is an interesting conversation, but continue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, and I was just going to say, philosophically, I wonder if he's a guy who's going to sit there and say, we need more evidence. I need to see Winn hit at a above average level for 2 more years. He is at the point right now where I think Mason's 4 years away from free agency, I believe. And, the question becomes, you are 1000% right. If he continues on the trajectory he's on right now, there's no doubt that at some point in time, he starts pricing himself out. Right? If he's both the glove and the bat, that's when you go, oh crap, we're too late. Yep. We're too late. And if he gets a year out, he probably sits there and say, well, why would I sign now? Get to the market. This is where I'm gonna get paid. So I love having these conversations about whether you sign guys early or don't sign guys early. And it's funny because, the Braves are just the prototypical test case. They signed everybody to long-term extensions, and they are struggling mightily at this point in time. And that's not to say that, so again, it's not like, hey, no one's going to dismiss that Ronald Acuna's contract is one of the best contracts in all of baseball. But now you sit there and you look at, is Michael Harris's contract a bad one? Ozzie Albies doesn't make a lot, but Ozzie Albies has been one of the worst offensive players in baseball this year. He's sticking around in Atlanta for a long time. So, it's so much is going to come down to what Chaim Bloom decides is his philosophy to run this team. And is he going to be a guy who wants to find a core and sign those guys long-term and try to build around it? Or is he going to be a guy who, takes the evidence every year and says, we'll take you to free agency because we don't know. We think that, you're 2 years, you'd match your value, but the 5 we've got to pay you after that are going to be down years. And I mean, with the way he's analytical on things, I almost struggle to see this team giving out long-term contracts. Because in my mind, if they didn't do it with Brendan Donovan before this year, I don't know they're going to do it. I don't know that they're going to do it with anybody.
You're speaking my language, because that was the other guy that I had been beating the table. I said, you're going to screw yourself because he's going to have another year removed from the UCL repair. His numbers are going to go up, and he is a heart and soul kind of guy. And with him, I am concerned that they've already kind of bungled that one. But I want to point to this comment from Joseph, who mentions, look at Volpe. Good thing the Yankees did not extend him. I actually disagree with that. A couple of comments talking about, well, he can't hit. He's sitting before tonight with a 725 OPS for the season, 101 OPS plus. I don't know as much about him defensively. I know Mason Winn. I trust him defensively. If Mason Winn, if you told me, you're going to sign this contract extension for Winn, he's only ever going to be about a 101 OPS plus, though. That's what you're going to get from him. I would say, great. I would fall over myself to sign that Michael Harris extension, because when you look at the Harris deal, there's not a year in that contract that's above $12 million in 2030. So, I know the bottom is not going to fall out on Mason Winn because of how good he is defensively, and he's still so young. I'm assuming I'm buying him offensively at basically what his floor is going to be. Even if he dips from here and just goes the way of Jordan Walker and just we see multiple years, he doesn't really quite figure it out, which I don't expect. I'm still living with paying that $10 million, $12 million range. Another good example, and we can move on to some other topics from today's game, obviously. Christian Campbell just signed that deal with Boston to begin the year. 8 years, $60 million, basically after playing 2 games or whatever it was. That's fine. I'm signing that 8-year, $60, $70, $80 million contract for a Mason Winn before I'm signing it for Christian Campbell, because I think Mason Winn's defense is going to be better than just about anybody's. And I know the bat is going to have its ebbs and flows, but there is so much talent in this kid. I wouldn't be surprised if instead of lingering around a 710, 720 league average OPS, he's a guy that's in that 760, 770 range, and we're talking about him as more of a perennial all-star by the time it's all said and done. That's the upside, though, and you're not paying for that upside if you signed him today. Granted, he's got to say yes. He knows what he could potentially be worth someday, too, but that's why I would be beating his door down and saying, yeah, we'll do this guarantee you $80 million thing, because I just don't see a $12 million outlay for Winn 8 years from now being a bad deal. He's just such a solid player. But you're right. It's one of the more fun conversations that the day the season ends, I think we'll be talking about it ad nauseum until we find out that the Cardinals are or not interested in extensions at this time.
He is Brenden Schaeffer. I'm Chris Pelikan. Cards win 8-7. They've taken the first 2 against the Cubs. 2 more still to come. This is the Cards Central postgame show, and it is brought to you by DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Pick Six app now, and use the code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5. To play $5, get $50 in Pick Six credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick Six from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick Six credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos.
So basically everything's been positive. There was so much positive coming out of this game, not a lot of negative. And I don't even know if I'd call Helsley's performance negative tonight. This is just becoming what it is with him at this point in time, right? That there's drama. I've seen numerous comments that he's costing himself money in his free agent deal. Obviously the value is not there trade wise at this point in time, more than likely, although people get nuts when it comes to bullpen stuff around the trade deadline. But again, I just think we're at a point with this team that the thought of trading anybody away is probably not there as you sit 2.5 games out of first place, sit in a wild card. But with Helsley, Brenden, what are you seeing? I mean, he's a guy who clearly has stuff. The velocity's there. But I mean, here he is living in this world of the 1.5 whip. And you're talking about, when you're a closer, you can't be putting on 1.5 guys, 2 guys every single inning. It just isn't what teams want when they're going to invest huge amounts of money into late inning guys. So, for whatever reason, it has not clicked with Helsley this year. He got it done tonight, and that's all that matters. But what are you seeing from him, and maybe why it's become, kind of a high wire act every night with him?
Yeah, it's just not sustainable, right? You mentioned the whip and the high number and volume of base runners that he has allowed on. And I really do think it generally boils down to the fastball. Like, that's where it's always started with him. And it's just been, I think, a stretch where he's not had the same, whether it's a combination of confidence in the pitch itself, in being able to locate it. Is there a tipping element going on? Like, I don't have any reason to believe there is, but it seems like guys are on the fastball. Now, granted, you look at tonight's outing in particular, I'm more inclined to credit Helsley for escaping the jam than I am to look at it from a negative light. And the reason for that is I just think Kyle Tucker is unbelievable. And he's the guy who hit a fastball, 100.8 mile per hour fastball. Not the perfect location by any means, but that guy is just a heck of a hitter. And there was also a slider that was hit for a base hit, I believe, as well.
That was I'm looking at my notes as well. It was Tucker, and then
nope, PCA. That was not a fastball. PCA's was a fastball too. MLB app was not loading for me. So, all right, the fastball has been the deal. 2 really good, capable hitters. That was at 101 point something, the one that PCA hit. He had a weird ass game, but he's also very capable of turning around a fastball. And I feel like right now, it's part of the reason we've seen him so hesitant to throw it at times. And this was a thing that had happened at times last year. I think Oliver Marmol would have said there were maybe some different mechanical things that had gone on in the past that they don't feel are as prevalent right now. But it's a confidence issue where I think the slider is his best pitch, and I think that's been the case for a while. It's just so wipeout nasty, but you have to be able to throw the fastball and get it by people, or at least throw it for strikes, so that they're not just sitting on the slider. Because what we saw tonight for a couple of those base hits, when the fastball did show up, the guys that were great hitters were ready to turn it around and hit it. The sliders were generally effective, which is usually the case. This wasn't like a game where he was spraying the fastball all over the place. He just didn't throw it a ton, and he's been doing that for a while, pitching backwards. The fastball has not been his best pitch. I don't know that it needs to be, but it needs to be a little bit closer in confidence, in location, and the ability to mix it, I think, compared to the slider with where he's been recently. And if that's not the case, you're going to either have what happened tonight, guys hitting the fastball, and so you've got traffic, or you'll have, he's not even comfortable throwing the fastball, so he's burying sliders. Guys are sitting off of it, and they're walking to get on base. It is more of the same in a lot of ways. It's probably not sustainable to continue allowing so much traffic and getting away with it. But, man, the Cardinals can be damn glad they got away with it tonight, because this was one you just couldn't afford to lose. After it was so emotional the way you got to that 8-7 lead, I'm going to say, look, Helsley's going to be all right, but he's not going to be what he was last year. That's got to be part of the calculus, I think, as you bake into how far can this Cardinals team go. You can't just take for granted that eventually he's going to lock in and turn it back on. He may, but it's kind of a hard thing to count on with the version of him we've seen this year, just a little bit lesser than what he was at his peak.
Yeah, and I see this in the chat nonstop, and it is the Maton for closer, right? And it's one of these things that, if you're
Maton for president, I'm seeing now.
That's true. Hey, why not? Let's just keep rolling straight up the pipe on that one. It's funny because you sit there and you go, if you ask me right this second, and I got to get three guys out, would I rather have Phil Maton or Ryan Helsley in the game? I think me personally says Phil Maton. I think I feel better about it. Having said that, you do something like that. That's the kind of thing that turns a clubhouse over, right?
Yeah.
You've got Ryan Helsley who, converted, 47 of 51 saves last year, something from there. And he's fighting it a little bit, getting the job done more often than not. And, here's the one thing I'll say, Brendan. I mean, if you look around Major League Baseball, there are not a lot of guys who are going completely unblemished in the ninth inning at this point in time, for whatever reason. I mean, Josh Hader seemed to be the guy, and he's blown a couple saves in the last week, there aren't guys. I mean, Devin Williams, the huge free agent or, trade acquisition by the Yankees, lost his job to Luke Weaver early. It's a tough role, and it seems to me that the juice wouldn't be worth the squeeze of flipping roles 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Yeah. It wouldn't. You're spot on. And Ollie Marmol is 0% close to doing it, by the way. There are people, I see him all the time. We're like, Brendan, what are you talking about? You're crazy. Helsley's going to screw us. And that's fine if you feel that way. I promise you, I am in lockstep with what the team is actually going to do about this. This isn't even a conversation for Oliver Marmol for the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, here's another angle that I'll spin at you. Tonight, they needed Phil Maton and Ryan Helsley to complete their roles. You could switch them if you want, but it had to happen either way that both of them were going to come through for you. So, I think you're just kind of rearranging and playing house with it if you want to say, yeah, let's do this. As a Major League Baseball manager, you cannot afford to play house with the closer position, with your clubhouse, with the team chemistry aspects of this. I think it gets lost. I think a lot of times we watch games on TV, we'll look at the box scores, and we'll have the Monday morning quarterback move to make. But I feel like it gets oversimplified, as though we're playing MLB The Show and it's a click of a button and I can switch the roles. It ain't gonna work that way. I mean, that's just not how it works in a Major League clubhouse. I can't say anything other than trust me, that's not how it works if you don't believe me, but it really isn't. And the Cardinals, look, I think internally they would say, yeah, we probably, if we're going to win the World Series, if we're going to go deep into October, maybe even if we're going to get to October, we need Helsley to be more than he's been. But there's a track record there. Yeah. So they're going to let him continue to try to be more than he's been. They're going to work with him. They're going to say, here's the way to use the most out of your arsenal. Do you have a straight fastball that doesn't go anywhere? Okay, here's how we can maybe get the most out of this. They're going to continue to try to work with him. I've seen comments of people saying, well, why would you even keep him if he's not going to sign with you? You're trying to win this year, and if you're not, you take a big package for him. But if his package is reduce in value because of the struggles, then all the more reason probably to just have him be more valuable to you than another team. And then you can have the qualifying offer conversation in the winter if you really want.
And I don't think it's out of the realm possibility that we see a much better version of Helsley down the stretch, that he does make a few adjustments and that sort of thing. So if we're gonna kind of wrap things up, maybe on the biggest of the negatives tonight in my mind, you and I were texting a little bit about Steven Matz, a guy who was who was so important to what this team was doing early in the season with his swing role. He's now allowed home runs in 3 straight appearances. He's allowed 7 earned runs in his last 4 out there. What are you seeing with Matz? Because you mentioned this earlier, that the pieces have fit together so nicely with this team, with the way the starters have gotten deep, the bullpen, the way that they've mixed and matched, and Matz has been a big part of that. I think it's going to be a really tough thing for this team to continue to be successful if Matz is going out there and giving up a couple runs every time he's out there.
Yeah, home run in 3 straight outings is not what the doctor ordered necessarily. Like we've seen Kyle Leahy kind of go through some struggles too. It started the year that you would never have thought Matz and Leahy are going to be your 2 most important relievers. And then for a while they were, and that was the Bible. Like, of course, it's Matz and Leahy. Like, you got to have those guys in there. And then they've both kind of fallen off the path at the same time. This is going to be a really interesting challenge and test, I think, for what this bullpen makeup is going to continue to look like. Hopefully you're getting guys like Maton and JoJo to lock back in, and you can kind of at least have a few guys that you feel good about in late inning roles. But right now, obviously, it's not perfect for Steven Matz. Far from it. It's a similar conversation where, like, these are kind of the guys you have. Yes, if you can get into a spot where you're clearly a buy type of team at the deadline, more so than a hold or a sell, you could argue that a strikeout caliber reliever would be the number one need. Is it from the left side or from the right side? Because if you're not counting on Matz or you're not counting on Leahy, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I do think they could use a strikeout reliever if they get into a point where, like, unequivocally they're in buy mode. But yeah, you're hoping that Steven Matz can bounce back. He's in a unique role that makes you wonder, like, how sustainable it is. For a while, it was just he was Teflon. Nothing really got to him. He could go an inning and 2/3. He could go, 3 innings. He could get 1 key out of a lefty if you needed it, and JoJo or John King was unavailable. Like, he was everything to Ollie Marmol, and now it's like maybe you have to think about it in terms of, all right, I'm not going to ask him to get an out in this inning and then go into the next one as often. I want to see him get a clean 1-inning outing and change the slate up a little bit for him, and maybe that's something that can jar things loose. I think you have to try some different things, but Ollie has also been really kind of having a good finger on the pulse of how he's been able to use a versatile bullpen. It's been a real luxury for him. So it's probably a hard thing as a manager to let go of, because you're going to be stubborn. You're going to say, I know these guys have performed for me in these exact spots, but you have to also recognize too, maybe when the times are changing a bit. That's a very interesting spot moving forward, is how they will manage the situation revolving around Matz as he continues to just not quite look like himself.
Seems really important to get him right. So like you said, I think if they've got to try to change him up situationally, it might make some sense to do that. But you just got to get him back to what he was, because I think his role is super valuable to this team. All right, Brenden, we'll start putting a wrap on this one and look forward to tomorrow as the Cardinals look to make it 3 straight against the Cubs, pulled within a game and a half. Interesting pitching matchup as Eric Fetty takes the bump for the Cardinals, and Matthew Boyd for the Cubs.
Yeah.
So we see the first left-hander of the series. Your thoughts on tomorrow's game?
Yeah, I'm trying to look this up right now. I feel like Matthew Boyd, we've seen him with matchups against the Cardinals previously. It feels on paper like a tough matchup. A guy that has good strikeout stuff, has a 2.8 ERA, has been really solid, resurgent really in recent years after going through some injury stints in his career. No Cardinals really with great numbers against him, except I will make note, and I bet you'll see him in the lineup because it's been a couple of days. Jordan Walker has faced him 1 time, and that went for a home run. He's actually faced him twice. Home run and a walk for Jordan Walker against Matthew Boyd. So, like, that does not get smaller than that sample size, but, like, if you're looking for an excuse to give Jordan Walker a little bit of opportunity because he's kind of been MIA recently with the rest of the lineup looking the way that it's looked, you can understand why. They're going to need some right-handed pop in the lineup, Chris. Like, we've seen the lefties do damage against these last 2 pitchers.
Where are you, Jordan Walker?
Walker, you're up. Mason Winn, great. Loved what you did for us today. Can you do it again tomorrow? Like, that's sort of going to be the vibe, I think. And you're going to find out maybe how much you miss Ivan Herrera, because you always had him as the right-handed thump. Contreras, obviously a candidate. Arenado, we're seeing a bit of a better version of him. But I think that's one of the bigger questions, too. Like, as you start to think about deadline, and I can't imagine the Cardinals buying in a way that mortgages the future. So, like, I don't think they're going to be doing all these moves to add short-term pieces. If anything, you might rearrange the deck with a guy that's under team control if you wanted to bring somebody in. But, like, they have been starved for right-handed hitting in this organization down the roster as you go. It's why Garrett Hampson is here. It's a move we haven't talked about, but they pick him up off waivers today. DFA Jose Barrero. Is Hampson like the same as Barrero in a lot of ways? Yeah, you're not expecting a lot at the bat. I think he's a better defender, though, and that's probably a reason to go ahead and do it, because I think they'll trust putting him out there in center field, putting him at shortstop in the various places that Garrett Hampson plays. He's a good runner as well, and he's a right-handed batter. So, like, that's why Ryan Vilade happened, folks. They need some right-handed hitting in this organization, and it's been a true blind spot for John Mozeliak the last few years. Just haven't been able to find it, and I think that's still the case, but that's why the games like tomorrow and Thursday are going to be somewhat of a challenge if you don't get the performances that you need from guys like Winn, Contreras, etc., because Herrera is going to show to be a hole in this lineup if the rest of the righties don't carry their weight against Boyd. And then you get Shota Imanaga, and we know what he can do on Thursday.
Yeah, and to your point on Hampson, I would say this about Hampson. They took Jose Barrero seemed to be a bit of a lottery ticket. Former very highly thought of prospect with a ton of athletic ability, who the Reds and Dodgers both found out couldn't really hit very well. Cardinals found the same thing out. Garrett Hampson, again, maybe not Joe Morgan, but Garrett Hampson's got a much better offensive track record. He's a vet. There's not going to be issues with him not playing all that often.
Yeah.
He'll pop in and out. I think it's a good low cost pickup. And I do think it underscores your point about the way this team has struggled against lefty pitching, that they're going out and trying to find guys who are just going to put together good at bats. I'd be stunned if Garrett Hampson is not in the lineup tomorrow.
I think the only reason he wouldn't be is because he wasn't physically there today. So if he's still not physically there tomorrow, but I think that'll probably be sorted out.
In the lineup.
That might be tough, but he'll start one of these next two games. You'd have to think, Victor Scott's done a really nice job defensively. I know the bat that's another kind of extension topic where it's like, if you extended a guy at his absolute floor offensively, anything he turns into at the plate, you've probably got your money's worth. But as a lefty against two lefties, you would think it would make sense to get Vic a day over these next two. So it'll be interesting to see what Hampson does. God bless him, but I don't think he can bring less than what Barrero did, because he was just kind of there. And
hard to.
He was like aggressively mediocre at everything, which is like a compliment if you're the 26th man. But then it's also like, what are the scenarios in which I'm going to put you into a game and trust it? Not really as a center fielder, not really as a shortstop. Are you going to bat for me? You can run, but I think Hampson can probably beat him in a race. So here you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brendan, a lot of fun, man. I mean,
this
boy, we went darn near about an hour, and I will tell you that reading the comments has been a lot of fun. Phil Maton is officially called hero status. I'm waiting for like Chuck Norris jokes to be replaced by Phil Maton jokes. And
he eats nails for a snack was the favorite one that I have seen so far on the Maton ledger.
I'm glad to see that Phil Maton is beloved in the world of YouTube chats. So anyway, this has been the Card Central postgame show here on STL Sports Central. For Brenden Schaeffer, I'm Chris Pelikan. We will see you tomorrow as the Cards try to make it 3 straight against the Cubs.